Welcome to Games Growth with Upptic, a podcast about the discipline of scaling digital games. We speak with industry experts and investigate trends to highlight the strategies, technology, and tactical methodology to profitably grow your games to massive global audiences. If you're interested in learning more, visit us at upptic.com. My name is Xander Agosta, Director of Marketing here at Upptic, and joining me today are my co-host,
Warren Woodward, co-founder of Upptic.
And our guests.
Hi, everyone. I'm Casey Grooms. I'm a co-founder of Soulbound.
And my name is Matthew Conn. I also go by Soul, S-O-L, and I'm also a co-founder of Soulbound and Chief Gaming Officer.
That's a cool title. I appreciate you joining us. We have an interesting set of topics to go about, more Web3 stuff, focused on gaming. I'm excited about this because it's some really tactical and actionable technology that I think is largely missing from a lot of the Web3 game tech companies that we speak to. I'm very, very excited to see what you guys are working on and to do a little bit of an exploration there.
And one thing I really want to dig into today that hopefully the listeners can benefit from is, I know for me, like doing work in Web3 growth marketing has just made me a better marketer. You've learned a tactic that's maybe been more natively from the Web3 space, but then you realize how you can take a version of that tactic and apply it across games marketing. So love to dig into some of the innovations that Soulbound is building, some of the things you see from some of Web3 marketing tech, and maybe what marketers that aren't even in Web3 today can learn from that for evolving the tactics of their own games marketing.
So let's just get right into sort of a background on where your perspective is on where the games marketing ecosystem is, where Web3 sits into that. So at a high state, how do you guys see the current state of the games marketing ecosystem and the technology that surrounds it?
Casey, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take a little bit of it, and then we'd love to hear Matt's thoughts. But I came from a Web2 mobile gaming background, and just from the differences on where we are now, it's pretty vast. There seems to be a lack of like attribution, a lack of marketing tools, and these also kind of present like an opportunity for us. And I think this is kind of where we went to is, how can we help game developers bring gamers back into these games and keep retention up and keep engagement up? And, it's kind of an exciting time for us to explore some of these tools.
Yeah, so I've been a game developer for about 15 years and publisher, and definitely the landscape of how people get their games in front of people is changing dramatically, right? I think you can see by E3 closing and all of these different big companies now basically going from being trade show companies to being online video companies. I think that what you're seeing is definitely a big shift across the board. And I think that we're not necessarily seeing the tool sets match that. I think that for better or worse, a lot of people use Discord, which for me, I'm a part of like 200 Discords. And I think that for a lot of people, they try using Discord as a way to catch all the information and news of all the different games, communities they follow. But I don't believe the Discord was really, truly meant for that. And I think that's kind of adapted to that. And I think that there's definitely a catch-up space that the tooling is not quite in line where the current kind of game community is at.
Right. And it seems like a lot of the new games are really dependent upon building this community. And so there's a big shift from paid UA and buying ads on Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, all these other like network channels to how do I build my community and how do I engage my users? Because my new users are now just my community. And as Matt mentioned, there's so many different Discord channels to drop into. So much information that's flowing is just getting lost in this mix of thousands of channels, and everyone's spewing information on like, come use my game, come buy my game. I have an NFT drop at this time. You need to do this level and get to this level in order to access this NFT. And then this gives you like this loot box. And all of this information is just like completely scattered everywhere. So it's kind of getting lost in the jumble.
So question. So I know we talk to a lot of games. I'm sure you folks talk to a lot of games as well. So talk a little bit about marketing and how marketing is still not super mature. Talk to the actual games and what's the distribution of how mature various games are.
I think that in a lot of ways, what we saw with early Axie and early blockchain games are very similar to what we saw with Zynga in terms of things like Farmville and Cityville. They're kind of early games where in a lot of ways, it's kind of a proof of concept. And as we know, making a good game, in parentheses, takes a long time. Making a game that has a production value that people expect from what they consider to be like a real video game takes years. What we've seen so far is just basically proof of work, just people going out there, trying different things, throwing basically like spreadsheets or equations and stuff with just some images over it, as opposed to really making an interesting game that has unique game systems that are working in tandem with one another. What I've seen over the last 6 months and years, I've been going to 3XP and Hacks and different Tokyo Game Show and seeing what people are putting out. There is real, legitimate games that are coming. Not that the games that are out now are not, but they're, I would say, more kind of mid-range games. What we're seeing are these big AAA titles that are going to be coming to platforms that are not only like super high production value, but also integrate the blockchain in a way that's more than just this quick and dirty financial layer, a proof that, you can sell a sword to another person. But the actual blockchain elements are actually integrated in a unique and engaging way. And I think ultimately those are the kind of games that are going to be successful, are the ones where the blockchain element actually matters and is somehow increasing the value of the game and the enjoyment of the game, as opposed to, say, what Ubisoft did with Ghost Recon, where they sold a helmet and it just has a different number on each helmet. So that's interesting and cool. You're expecting people to go and learn about a new blockchain technology and spend money just to have something that no one is even going to really be able to see. But I think these early experiments are good and useful, and that's how we're evolving to the space that we're at.
Yeah, you touched on an interesting topic, Matt. And Casey, you first came on my radar. I think we were working in the industry at the same time. It's like the emergence of the mobile free-to-play era of marketing, I think in different capacities of the industry. And I'm curious for both of you guys, the issues that you just talked about, Matt, of the first generation of these Web3 games and how a lot of them leave something to be desired. Does it rhyme with what we saw at the beginning of mobile free-to-play, how everything first to market there was, these aren't real games, everything was low quality, like cash grabs? Does it feel like that to you, or is there something different about Web3 gaming in its current state versus that dawn of the mobile free-to-play era?
I definitely think there's a lot of rhyming, but it's definitely not one-to-one. I think that it's very easy for gamers, and it gives them easy clout points to be able to say, that's not a real game. Those are games for babies, basically, or whatever. But it's easy to do that when there's no IPs and when the games are not very developed. As free-to-play got things like Call of Duty or Hearthstone or Valorant or League of Legends or this or that or whatever, you can't be a gamer nowadays and not play free-to-play games. And it's like everything is basically free-to-play or has some level of free-to-play. And nowadays, something like a Street Fighter 6, where you have this metaverse-like level of it, you still are paying a $60, $70 entry fee just to get in, to spend more money. That's the exception. I do think that there's that similarity of the same pushback we saw to DLC and free-to-play and mobile games. I do think that we're going to see that with Web3 gaming. But I do think there is a separation there, in that now that there is a financial element to it, and now we're entrusting you with your assets, people to figure out how they want to own their assets, how they want to value their assets, protecting them, figuring out where do these items live in their digital lives. I think what's interesting is looking at Roblox, right, where people have built their digital lives over the last decade or so, mostly young people. And now they've introduced limiteds, which are basically just Roblox NFTs, and figuring out how people, they value them and how they talk about them has been really fascinating for me, because I think that that's basically what we're going to see as other platforms start to bring our digital lives into this more financialized layer. And I think that we don't really know how gamers are going to react. We know that they have reacted poorly. And I think part of that is because, just like with DLC, they imagine a worst case scenario of every time I die, I'm going to have to pay 99 cents. It's like, we're going to make this amazing $50 million Call of Duty game, and one person has a satellite laser gun and no one else can play the game. We got to find those places where the game creators and the brands can reach a compromise with the players, just like with free-to-play, right? Where we kind of decided as a whole that cosmetics were okay, but pay to win in some types of games is not okay. Finding that balance, I think, is where we're going to start actually being able to onboard more traditional gamers.
And I think Fortnite just this week launched with the Nike collaboration and .swoosh, right?
Right.
The NFT in Fortnite, and you do kind of like this treasure hunt to go and find it and access it. So it's starting to come mainstream more and more.
Right.
I'd like to back up a little bit. Matt, you said some really interesting things about Discord. And I think that that's something that we haven't really paused and reflected on within Web3 gaming, of just, we've really shoehorned this third-party platform and said, this is the main hub for Web3 community activity, Web3 gaming activity. I'm curious, kind of using Discord for something that wasn't necessarily designed one-to-one to do. What are the limitations that teams are seeing when that is the main conduit for interacting and activating their community?
Yeah, for one, obviously you have to go through third-party tools because they don't actually support any kind of crypto integration right now. And a lot of that was because of the pushback from the community. They clearly wanted to go into the space and then they got scared away. And now if you want to do things like you have to use Collabland or Me6 or whatever to be able to verify NFT ownership. So nothing is easy. Everything is complicated as with the steps, and makes it very hard for the average person just to use it and feel like it works, because it's not integrated into the core experience. But I think just in general, especially with Web3 games, you have no idea where to go. I just want to know what's going on with the game. I just want to know are the new updates, especially with these Web3 games on Sandbox. So I have this Gordon Ramsay NFT. And now during this month, if I go and do this Sandbox world and do all the quests, I get to be entered into this specific pool just for Gordon Ramsay NFT avatar owners. And that's really important context for me. Like, I don't want to miss that. And if I miss that, I'm going to be pissed off at everybody. I'm going to be pissed off at Sandbox because I missed out on an important way to make money and to get exclusive items. And so it's very stressful. And I think that, especially now with the financial layer, not being able to organize all this information is even more stressful. Just as a quick anecdote, I had one of the Murakami Clone X's, and there was like a free or like a mint that was less than an ETH or whatever for one of the Murakami flowers. I only barely was able to get it like maybe a few hours before it closed. And if I had missed that, that would have been $20,000 I would have just missed out on. It's only because I was just happened to be looking around on the Discord that day and I had free time. It was like, oh my God, the mint is live right now. There's got to be a better way to do it than this. And obviously not everyone's going to be missing $20,000 drops, but if you're a young person, you're playing a game and like, oh, we have this special thing in symbiogenesis and for a week you can get double this and you miss it, it's not a good feeling.
Yeah, so I think that's a good segue to maybe go into a little bit more about what your team has been building at Soulbound and how what you're working on addresses some of these challenges in engaging and activating Web3 communities.
Yeah, and just I think one way to frame this is, can we talk about what's the pain point that you guys are trying to address and then how you solve it? And that order I think would be really helpful.
For sure. I mean, I would say that this specific pain point is probably not the core of our business. I mean, it is something that we do want to eventually fix. One of the core problems that we do see is that when you get into Web3 games and just gaming in general, there is no filter for context. There's nothing to go like, hey, what are my friends doing? What's currently interesting and live? Based on things that are in my inventory or based on the kind of gamer I am, what should I even go do? Right? There's no context at all. And I think that we can help fix that. But I think that to get there, we want to build out this gaming reputation layer powered by achievements that are provably real. And that's one of the great things about the immutability of blockchain is that when people do actions, whether it be in-game or out-of-game or whatever, and we can verify that those actions are legitimate, we can log that onto the blockchain. We now have a way that basically consumers can opt in to cookies that they are excited about, right? Like when they mint a badge or they mint an achievement on a platform, they now have this item that basically says that they are not, that they're a real person, probably, depending on the complexity of the action, but they have a thing that verifies their identity in some way and their authenticity, but also the type of person. Depending on what the quest is, it could be that they killed a certain amount of enemies or they built a thing or whatever. But now you're getting a more and more of a legitimate idea of who this person is. Through that, we're able to better understand who the gamer is and then can provide better contextualized data. And obviously, when working with brands and games, can also use that as data points where they can be like, hey, you're the type of people we want to try to bring into our games. That provides us with a business opportunity to allow them ways to better provide visibility to those opportunities.
Can you explain, like, it's 5, what is Soulbound, sort of at the foundational layer for folks who maybe don't know about it?
Sure. Just the very basic idea of it is that if you've ever played Steam or PlayStation or Xbox, you may see that you get achievements when you do things. But those achievements are locked to those specific platforms. We are creating a global achievement system that is cross-chain, cross-platform, cross-Web 2, cross-Web 3. It is a global achievement platform for games in this current world of 2023. And when you do those achievements, you're able to mint basically badges and mint experience points on the blockchain to verify that you did those things. And in doing those things, you are able to gain levels and earn prizes, and you're able to do quests. And similarly to like Coinbase learn and earn type things, you're able to go and see different games, learn about how you can earn experience points or items for going and doing quests in those games. And for a lot of people, it's a nice, easy onboarding ramp to trying these games where you might go and go, I don't even know what to play. I don't know what's a scam or not. I don't know where to start. And at least I think in these early days of Web3, we're able to combine that easy early context with providing achievements that are immutable, that are tied to you for life. That's why our company name is Soulbound, is that you do an action, you've earned this achievement, you choose to opt in and earn a badge, and now you have that badge and you can proudly keep it for life. You can't buy it, you can't sell it. It is immutable and tied to you.
I want to get back into talking about the different products and what are the use cases for marketers, but I just want to make sure I understand what's the core vector which people interact with your platform. Is it that they go through and they play a game and then they get, is that how it works? Or like what exactly is like the core vector which people are interacting with your technology?
Yeah, generally people are coming to our platform either because they are playing in one of the games that's on our platform and they heard, oh, well, I'm already playing this game, come to Soulbound and get extra items, and then they become a part of our ecosystem. Or they're looking for things to do in the Web3 ecosystem, and they find our site.
Yeah, our first vision is essentially right now through questing and achievements. As we partner with different games, we onboard them, and we have a series of quests and missions and events that we activate the users with. So it could be take a screenshot. So we partner with, for example, different game influencers in Twitch and YouTube, and we'll throw them into the game on a specific day and time, and we'll work with the game, boost their statistics, and all the gamers on the platform at this time go in and try to hunt and kill them. And some of these quests are just kill the influencers, and whoever kills him the most or the quickest gets different experience points and achievements and badges associated with that mission. And so it's just some of these things, right? Take a screenshot with XYZ, or meet me in this house, or in the Paris Hilton experience in Sandbox, things like that. And so we track all of this, and then you're able to just do it, accomplish it. It gets put on your profile, and it becomes a part of your gamer identity.
Makes sense. And so putting our marketing hats on, can you talk about what are the core marketing problems? You sort of touched on it, but I really want to double down here because I think this is really relevant to our audience. What are the marketing challenges that your technology is then helping to address? Can you speak through that a little bit?
For sure. I think that what we're seeing a lot of, right, is brands, they're building experiences in the metaverse, right? So the case you're saying, Nike's did a special world in Fortnite Creative for their Air Max launch. Wendy's is doing a thing in Horizons or whatever. When they do them, they have no way to be able to pump the numbers and then to get people into the event to make sure it looks good and really drive value outside of just driving and doing ads on Facebook, Twitter, and being like, hey, come to our world, whatever.
Right.
And they do that and they get made fun of because people, they go, oh, that's silly, that's whatever. So they need a better way to be able to incentivize people to actually go to their events and to interact with their platform. So with our system, we're basically building this live ops system for games and brands to be able to turn the dials and say, oh, we have a specific event that's going on. We want to boost it and give us this much of our MXP experience points, or give away a fungible token or game items. They can turn those dials and then basically boost those things to drive value when it's needed. So theoretically, right, if let's say Ledger is holding a big event in Sandbox and they're like, oh, Yatsu and all these important people are there in their little Sandbox thing and the thing is empty, and they go let's throw down $500 or whatever. Let's boost these quests and experiences, make sure they get pushed to the right types of people, and then that way we can drive engagement right away. And I think there isn't really anything like that currently in the marketing space for Web3.
And we pushed all that in real time. And so we built out these self-serve controls and panel for game developers to do that themselves in their onboarding process in Soulbound.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it seems really interesting. And I assume it's mostly a Web3 native audience. And I'm curious about who those folks are. And then also, what sort of scale are you guys delivering generally for your biggest partners?
Now, I would say that the audience is actually a mix of gamers, some of them Web3 and some of them Web2. I think for a lot of Web2 gamers that use our platform, they find this to be one of the easiest ways to digest Web3 games. Just because, again, it is so financialized and can be so intimidating that being able to see, hey, here's some quests, here's some ways to get started. They can learn a little bit more about the games, helps aid discovery and just be able to learn about games, see what people are doing before they dive in. And also vet the experience in game.
Some of the games we work with, our big goal is just help on retention. Right. That's kind of our big thing. There is a user acquisition play, and game developers can use Soulbound to acquire and find new users within our Soulbound user base and ecosystem.
Right.
Our big vision is just getting gamers back into these games, continuously playing and creating engagement. Some of the games that we work with, for example, World Eternal, which is coreloop.gg, we were able to bring back some of these gamers and retain them. And each of our users spent upwards of $1,000 on different game assets and NFTs. So our top users just became their biggest whales. And they're continuously playing an hour, 2 hours a day, still to this day, in World Eternal.
Right.
Those are some of our success points that we point out to different games.
Yeah, and I think that right now what we have is this proof of concept where we have this questing and we're driving people to different experiences or to do different things. And they're basically doing it just because they get their name on a leaderboard. They're getting a high score. But as those things are tied to reputation, as they're tied to being able to actually earn or hey, I need someone to go and run security for my event in the metaverse, or I need 3 people to join me in a game, in a squad in big time because I'm running a big stream and I need 3 really, really good players. And what's great is that lookalike data and stuff on Facebook, Google is not going to give you their skill level. It's not going to give you hey, I want to market this ad specifically to the top 10% of first-person shooter gamers, or I'm Sandbox and I want to specifically give this quest only to people that have built so many worlds in Decentraland or Other Side or whatever. And now we have really deep data that marketers can use and give specific actions, right? Where, like Casey was saying with this World Eternal thing, they can use our platform to specifically target these super whales and give them specific messages based on specific items and be like, wow, like we see that you've gotten to Lilith level 50, anything, right? But we can use contextual in-game data to specifically decide who to target with what quests and what opportunities.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you're pointing out, because one of my biggest critiques of being able to use the blockchain for game marketing is that a lot of it is just noise. And if you're able to take some of that noise and turn it into meaningful data, which creates actions that marketers can take, that is a pretty clear value prop.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing about what your team is building and this time in the market is the point where we are in quote unquote real games from Web3 coming to market is changing. A year ago, it was about these first products to market, these lower quality, simpler games. We talked about that up top. And there's a lot of stigma about what a Web3 game is and why you play it. And I think a lot of the default, especially people outside of the sector, but even inside the sector, is these are speculation devices. So the challenge that I see a lot of developers at right now is, we ship the real game, but no one will try it. Every team I talk to that's shipped even like some of the best games in the space have challenges with DAU, have challenges with engagement. So now as the market matures, it makes sense that there's a need for products like what you guys are doing, or at least us all working on this deeper part of the funnel of like, no, it's not about driving someone into Discord now. Now we need to get you to actually play the game and maybe overlook the stigma that you have of this as a segment, particularly if we're bringing people in from outside of Web3. Yeah, I do think it's a very interesting and relevant time to be focusing on like this deeper part of the funnel.
Yeah, I think that there's multiple ways that this will be resolved. I think in the same way as like no one now talks about the environmental impact really, right, of blockchain, because a lot of these things got fixed obviously with the move to proof of stake and obviously Bitcoin no longer being like as dominant as it once was. I think in the same way, like people will come over to Web3 gaming naturally if the products start getting, and I think that they'll be more and more open-minded and forgiving. But I think that right now it is really difficult because I think that there is this very early stigma, even similar to like early Kickstarter projects, right? Where you just go, there's so many of them ended up not seeing the finish line or were rugs. One of the projects I advise on is High Street, which is a VR metaverse. And I see what they're working on. I know what they're working on. I know it's a legitimate company. The amount of crazy ideas out there of like what it is and that it's just this giant elaborate rug is there because I think that people had been burned so many times in the past in the space. And so I think in time it's going to take trust and reputation, games delivering on their promises, market leaders to come out of that space. And same with that also, as these trusted game brands like Square and Bandai Namco and stuff start dipping their toes in as well, people I think will also be a lot more open-minded to things, right? When people, they want to see their Final Fantasies and their Digimons and their IPs that they're familiar with from the gaming and anime world. A lot of this stuff, right? Not that these things can't be big, but Axie Infinity, My Pet Hooligan, these are all unique new IPs that are not necessarily going to resonate with an average person, or they're going to take time to get built and get off the ground.
You talked about how early we are and how early these different game segments are, or different parts of Web3 games ecosystem are. What do you think are the key unlocks in technology that we need to see in order to get Web3 games to go out to the mainstream? Is it that we need to just hybrid it with Web2 games and call it Web 2.0, or are there key unlocks that can make Web3 games stand up on their own? And if so, what are the technologies that we need to get there?
I think just one part of this question, at least one part of the answer is, we'll at one point drop the Web3 portion of it, and all games will just be just games. And some might have crypto or blockchain-based elements and NFTs, and some might not. But I think right now there is definitely a distinction just because it's like it has crypto or doesn't have crypto. But in the future, it's all going to be starting to get blended together.
Your hypothesis is just more of a blending of the traditional games into the Web3 game ecosystem, just there isn't as much of a distinction? Is that sort of the core hypothesis, or are the key technologies required to either do that or to unlock Web3 as a standalone segment?
I think it's that. And I think the next level is when consoles, I guess, start to accept it and are okay with having blockchain elements.
Well, I think that Epic is going to have to be the one to really lead the charge right now. And they need to integrate these Web3 elements into the core experience. I mean, if they do it with Fortnite or any of their Epic exclusive, like big titles, they're like, look, like here's how these things work. Here's your wallet, and people, they accept it. Steam and everyone else is just going to follow suit. And so Epic has taken the onus of carrying it right now. Well, obviously, once the consoles are open to that and allowing that, then it's totally game on. And then we're going to be in the next golden age of that. But I think that for now, consumers are even just getting used to the idea of having different inventories that are persistent across different games, right? In a way, I have a wallet in Fall Guys. I bought costumes and things on there that are tied to that. And it's basically, that is my own wallet. And I think that consumers are only going to be delighted, I believe, as the complications of setting up wallets, getting into blockchain are diminished, and people can just be like, oh, look, all those things that you bought, now they're yours forever, or you own them, or you can bring them to different consoles, or you choose to sell them. And I think that's going to bring a lot of gamers, once they understand and we move away from the you can make money fast thing that puts off a lot of gamers, and instead being like, no, you get to own your achievements, like we do with Soulbound. You get to own your items. That's going to be stuff that gamers are going to really resonate with.
I feel like the stigma is pretty hard set with older gamers versus younger gamers. So if you're growing up playing Roblox and Minecraft, you're a bit more open to quote unquote Web3 gaming, or having a wallet and your assets being tied to your wallet and trading and buying and selling there. And the stigma is more maybe a 30 plus.
100%. We got to remember at the end of the day, as much as we may not want to admit it, we are older gentlemen who are getting older, right? And we're making products that are generally going to be for younger adults and teen adults and people in their early 20s. And I know a lot of game developers and gamers who would refuse to build things on mobile. They just don't believe in it. They don't believe in DLC. They don't believe in any. That's great because that's what we grew up on. But that's not how a lot of new consumers are seeing the world. And we don't necessarily need to hold on to these 30-plus-year-old ideas of how the game industry worked when we were playing Genesis or NES or whatever.
One of the things I was going to say is it sounds like the thing that you're saying is the biggest blocker actually platforms, right? You mentioned about console, PC, Epic. Those are all the things that like you basically need to unlock to say, hey, let's run with it. I think people are generally open to the idea of using their wallet as a unique identifier. But I think one of the challenges is around how do we actually link the wallet across all those platforms? Is it just going to be that, you go into Epic, you'll tie your wallet to the Epic store, and then you'll do the same with Sony, PlayStation, and then once you have that, you just have it all centralized and it's fine, and you can use it across platform? Or do you have a more nuanced way of thinking about how this is going to work?
Yeah, it is the way the Epic Game Store is working right now, right? As you go in, you're like, I'm linking my .swoosh, and I'm linking all this stuff, and then theoretically, it's all connected. And theoretically, if you're a game developer, you can then ask the platform for that data.
Right.
So I do think at some level, it is going to be tied to the platforms, right? We don't live in a world where everyone is going and downloading and paying for DRMs, right? We're all going to Steam or PlayStation Store, and we want, in a way, to live in those walled gardens. And so ultimately, we have to get those people who are the owners of those walled gardens to believe and understand the value of that. Who knows, right? Like we could see things like Ultra and obviously this new GameStop player platform take off. And then that's the beauty of competition, is that if they start doing that and PlayStation and Steam and stuff, they start seeing the progress that those things are making and don't pivot, they're going to potentially get left behind. Or if they be like, no, it's not going to work, and it doesn't work, obviously, good for them. I think we all believe and we see where the future of this is heading. They didn't get there because they didn't know how to do business. And I think that they're going to see the reality of the situation and pivot.
We're kind of like in this very interesting early stage right now, but it reminds me of a lot of opportunities back in the mobile space, or just like right now there's like a wallet war and a blockchain war. So everyone right now, there's maybe 5-6 different chains trying to become this coveted, I'm the gaming chain, use my chain for gaming. And there's Polygon, there's Avalanche, there's Sui that just got launched, Solana, Immutable, right? So everyone's vying for, we are the gaming chain, please use our chain as a game developer. Not only that, then there's wallets within each chain and ecosystem trying to be the wallet of choice for gamers, or just generally, who's going to best MetaMask, who's going to be the gaming wallet of choice. We're coming across this cycle and we're being pitched by maybe a new wallet every week. Hey, use our wallet on Soulbound, use our wallet on Soulbound. And it's kind of like, well, what's the difference between all of these different wallets? And starting to be the difference of what the difference between all these different chains. And then there's now starting to become a launcher war. And I don't want to say the war, but now
it is.
Right. Web3 launches are coming out. Then you have Steam, which has laid their stakes saying we're never doing Web3, but that could change if Epic starts doing Web3 now more, and other launches are now doing Web3. And so there's like war brewing between like who's going to win this in terms of just being that infrastructure tech. I think that's one interesting thing that's going to play out. And it's also kind of confusing too, just as a game developer, what are you going to choose? How are you going to build on? What are you going to use? Like what's best? What's going to win? If I build on Sui, but maybe Avalanche is the one that wins.
But I think that the issue as a game developer is that it's not just like oh, well, Steam takes 30%, but they have this, and Epic takes 20%, but they have this. I feel like you can look at apples and oranges and go, here's what GOG's going to give me, here's what PlayStation's going to give me, and you can figure out, oh, I don't want to release on this platform because there's no users, right, or whatever. But on this, now you have to take into account like the security of the chain. We think the chain, like how many users are on the chain, what types of transactions are on the chain, how much are people spending, is there easy onboarding? There's so many choices between, if you're a game developer. I think that for a lot of people I talk to who are even open to exploring Web3 gaming, they don't even know where to start. They don't know which chain to use. And they think, especially if they're going to make a game that's going to take 2-3 years to make, they don't want to choose a chain that might not even be around in 2 years. Or, let's say that we do have a dominant one in 2 years and you made a game for a chain that ends up being completely dead. And you're like, oh, this sucks, right? So I think that there's definitely that problem where there is no established right way of doing things. I think Ethereum and Polygon are like the safest to make a game on right now, but it's still so nascent. We have no idea where it's going to be in 5 years.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of noise around that. I want to back up. I think you guys touched on a really important point, and I think a big part of why our team long-term is so focused on what Web3 can bring to gaming. You talked about younger generations, younger people, and their lack of the same stigma. And this is tying back to an earlier theme. This is also something we saw with free-to-play. Like younger people, like they don't even blink if something's free to play. In fact, they prefer it. It's intuitive to them that they can try a game first, that they can spend an amount in a game that they want to, rather than have a barrier of entry up front. And a thought exercise that I always pose to people who are like very anti Web3 is, imagine an alternate universe where this technology came to light sooner, and it was the norm in games that you could own the items, that you could trade the items that existed outside of the game. Now imagine that there was a hot new technology that was like, okay, our whole thing is you don't get to own those things anymore. Who would think that that is better? Like what gamer would say, I demand that I no longer own these items and that they're only owned by the developer and that I can no longer trade them? And I feel like if you frame it like that, it becomes very intuitive how this technology adds value to gaming, and also frames that like a lot of it is just momentum. This is not what I'm used to. And I think if we can get past the stigma and the newness of this, and just see it for what it can add to game design, that's ultimately the value that Web3 is going to bring to gaming. Curious if you guys have additional thoughts.
I think that we do need more game designers to get into the space and actually think about how blockchain can actually be used to create more interesting game experiences. For instance, on Twitch, game developers can integrate something like crowd control, where someone tips, like if they're in a boxing match, a player might come into the audience and their name is above that player, right? And so now tips are somehow integrated into the game, or they can throw trash or whatever, right? But now there's actually a unique integration. And I think in that same way, when you look at something like, let's say, Metal Gear Solid, where one of the bosses can read your memory card and then will change his dialogue based on what you have and what save files you have, there's no reason why you can't have something like that in a blockchain game, especially because now you have immutable data about what's in their wallet. You can have immutable data about like the Soulbound achievements. You could say, oh, I see that you really like this type of game, or whatever. But like, just as an example, you could actually use this data to actually influence in-game conversations of the world, or you create a game that uses a procedurally generated level, and maybe it uses information that's in your wallet to procedurally generate that level. That'd be sick and interesting and unique. So I just think that we haven't yet seen the really creative side. We're really seeing this financialized side, which is obviously important. And there's so many ways that the blockchain element changes the marketing and way that we're going to be making money off of these games. But I think that for gamers, they want to see how it actually is going to influence the game itself as a game in a positive way.
Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest concepts that you've just thrown out this whole conversation. It's like, that's the piece that I'm super, super excited about, is how can we use this technology to fundamentally change game design? I think that's what's really exciting. Cool. Well, I think we're going to wrap right there. And maybe it's my favorite point, which is why we'll wrap right there. But thank you both for joining us for this conversation. Really insightful for our audience, I'm sure. If someone wants to get a hold of either one of you or both of you and learn more about Soulbound, how can they do that?
Yeah, Casey, CASEY at soulbound.gg, Soul, S-O-L, at soulbound.gg is for Matt. Go to website, Twitter, Discord. I think we'll post up some of those. And yeah, feel free to reach out.
Awesome.
Yeah, Matt, Casey, thank you so much for joining. It's really cool to meet builders that are working on this gamer journey, but deeper into the funnel. And I think it's indicative of how the sector is maturing. And so wish you guys all the best. Excited to see where Soulbound goes next.
Really excited to show you guys what we're going to be working on in the coming months and years. And thanks so much for having us on.
Awesome. So as always, the podcast was brought to you by the team here at Upptic. Here at Upptic, we do all things to help games grow. We build some pretty cool software for everything from iOS privacy navigation in your UA to creative asset management. And then we also do full service growth work for game teams across all platforms and technologies. So we grow PC games, mobile games, Web3 games. It all blurs together into the beautiful mush these days. So if you're building a rad game and need either the tech resources or the human capital to scale it profitably, reach out to us through our website. It's upptic.com. That's upptic.com.
Talk soon.